Yuri, thank you as always for taking time to talk with us today. What's the power situation where you are?
Good evening, JJ, and thanks a lot again for inviting me. Now, the power situation is not very good, I should say. I am in the capital, Kyiv, and it is almost impossible for life to be normal, for businesses to operate as normal, because in different parts of Kyiv, the power outages happen regularly nowadays. In some parts of Kyiv, 8 out of 12 hours of daytime, we don't have electricity. That means that the internet is out. Fortunately, we have already received from our international partners support in the form of electrical generators, electricity generators, which are now installed in all the hospitals. So at least that issue is solved. And it's important, as you understand, it's one thing when you cannot use your kettle or your Wi-Fi, but it's a completely different thing when you're in a hospital doing a cardio surgery and then all of a sudden the lights go out. So we are thankful to our international partners for providing. I've heard that around 500 power generators have been delivered to the Ukrainian hospitals across the country, and our Ministry of Health actually said that pretty much all of the hospitals are now supplied with these equipment, which is important. But overall, across the country, Kyiv is suffering from these outages. Other places in Ukraine, it differs because the damage that has been done to the power grids in different parts of Ukraine is different, but power cuts everywhere.
So, Yuri, the power in Kyiv, you said it's out 8 of 12 hours. So is that because of mandated power cutbacks, or is this because of attacks, or is it a combination?
It's because of attacks. We've never had these kind of power cuts before. But now that these attacks occurred and they deliberately targeted our electricity infrastructure, so what has happened, of course, is that damage was done to these power plants, these power stations, and they are being fixed. Of course, the government is doing a lot to actually restore these capacities as soon as possible. But at the same time, we have what we have. It takes time because some of the damage that was done by the missiles and by the Iranian drones, some of this damage has been quite significant.
So, how are you fighting off these attacks? I assume these are the drones and the missiles, or is it a combination of other things? So how are you dealing with those attacks? Because this has been happening for a few weeks now, these concentrated attacks on the power system. What's the Ukrainian military and the government doing to fight back on that front?
Yeah, well, first I have to mention that during the last week, the intensity of these attacks has decreased, fortunately. It is difficult to say, what is the reason for that, whether they've run out of missiles, which we know that the Russians are running out of missiles. And this is why they're talking, for example, to Iran, according to our intelligence, and asking Iran to provide them with ballistic missiles, in addition to the drones that Iran is already providing. So that's number one. But of course, the way we deal with these threats, because the strikes still occur in different parts of Ukraine. Kyiv was not the target recently, but other places in Ukraine are. So of course, we have our air defense, which is very efficient, and we are learning how to handle these drones. For example, right now we are able to shoot down about 85% of all the Iranian drones that are shot at our cities. The second thing, which has been very instrumental in the last couple of days, was that our partners, our international partners, have started providing Ukraine with modern, very sophisticated air defense systems. We got like an Iris-T system from Germany. We got NASAMS systems from the US just 2 days ago. We got like Aspide system from Spain. Spain also delivered to us some Hawk systems. So we're kind of beefing up our air defense capabilities because we understand that this missile terror is far from over and we have to be prepared for these types of strikes in the future.
So down to the southern part of the country, where the Russian forces have occupied territories, for instance, around Mariupol, Zaporizhia, Kherson. I'm hearing about some kind of construction of some kind of defensive system that they're trying to build called the Dragon's Teeth. I'm sure you've heard of this. Explain what that is.
Well, I'm not quite, these guys, they come up with all sorts of things. Like we've seen the so-called Wagner defense lines, and it was the pictures of this were taken like even from satellite, and it's not clear, why they're putting it where they're putting it. It doesn't make any sense from the military point of view. So some of the things that they're doing seem to be really difficult to explain. But what really is happening is that the enemy is suffering tremendous losses. I mean, right now, every day they are losing from 5 to 800 people daily. I mean, this is, we're not sure for how long Russia can sustain this degree of losses. All these newly mobilized, many of them, they spend a couple of hours on the front line and they go back in plastic bags. And this, of course, this is beginning to create this concern within the Russian society because, many of them, they've been so brainwashed by their propaganda. I was just the other night, it's a rare occasion nowadays, but I forced myself to watch this new Netflix movie, All Quiet on the Western Front. And this movie is a very good depiction of some stupidity of war, of situations where, and, I'm watching this movie, which is about the First World War, and I can see that Russians almost like at some point, they've not progressed. I mean, they are using people as cannon fodder. They're using these meat grinder tactics. They're not achieving any military outcomes. So this is just baffling, honestly. I mean, they're just throwing their people under the bus in large numbers. They're not gaining anything. So it's very difficult to explain what they're up to and all their defense. And the fact that they are constructing some defense capabilities, some trenches, some fortifications, only shows that they are afraid of the Ukrainian army, because we are little by little, meter by meter, we are advancing, we are, moving forward, and soon there will be a day when we will liberate our land, because that's our only choice.
Part of the reason why I asked about this thing that they're building, the Dragon's Teeth, is because of just how ridiculous it sounds. But basically, it's a pyramid kind of structure that they're building. Concrete. They have a couple of concrete plants that are building these things.
Yeah, I saw the photos. Yeah, I saw the images. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
They're trying to basically build these things from Zaporizhia to Nikolsk. I mean, truth be told, it's just baffling, as you say, to even understand what the logic behind that is, considering what you're doing from the air. What the Ukrainian Air Force and the military are able to do from the air with the advanced weapons. So you mentioned that they're losing 500 to 800 troops a day. What are the numbers for your side?
Well, we don't disclose these numbers for a number of reasons, but the latest figure that we had was, for example, that during the Kharkiv counteroffensive, and I think this in a way also referred to the situation in the east, our president said that for every 10 Russian soldiers, we are losing 1 Ukrainian soldier. So it's still a lot to us, because for us, every Ukrainian is a life, is something that we are fighting for. But we have to, be realistic. This is a war, and losses are on both sides. It's just that we are fighting a smarter war, and we have more regard for human life. We would never, our commanders, they would never give orders to attack certain positions while there is full understanding that this will not lead to anything. We get reports, for example, from those Russians who have been detained as prisoners of war, or those who have surrendered, and they're all complaining that this, like, the level of stupidity of Russian command. They are giving orders, their soldiers, to attack understanding full well that these are futile attacks. They are doomed from the actual moment they are given. So they're literally, it's almost like it's done to, we don't even know what for, because if you're, for example, if you're defending, right? So you're sitting in trenches and you're waiting for the enemy, for the other party to advance. But they are attacking. They're attacking in absolutely hopeless scenarios. I mean, this doesn't, that doesn't allow itself to be explained in any way.
Yeah. One more thing. You're talking about the futility of the attacks they're trying to launch against Ukrainian forces. So we heard a couple of weeks ago that it probably was a matter of time before the Ukrainian forces would essentially run the Russians out of Kherson and some of that other part of the area, the southern area that they're in. We're hearing reports as well that Russia's beefing up its efforts to try to hold it. Do you get the sense, though, that this is still something that Ukraine can and will achieve in the short term?
You mean liberation of Kherson?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's our goal and that's our objective. But of course, the weather conditions have been a factor now. So, for example, the wheel-based military equipment is, because the terrain is now different, right? It's softer, it's muddier. So there are limitations as to what we can actually do on the battlefield. So this, of course, makes us replan and reconsider certain options. Plus, it is not kind of clear what is actually happening in Kherson, because as you know, Kherson is divided by the Dnieper River, and right now the right-hand side, the right bank of Kherson, it's been evacuated. They've looted everything they could, right? Museums, shops. They've deported about 80,000 Ukrainians to the Russian-controlled territory. And at some point, it even looked like they were going to flee and abandon the right bank of Kherson entirely. But at the same time, our intelligence tells us that it's not entirely so. I mean, there are quite capable military regiments still based in Kherson, and according to this version of events, they are getting ready for some street fights, or perhaps they are trying to lure Ukrainian army into Kherson and the right bank of Kherson, with the view to setting a trap for our soldiers. Whether they are planning to throw a bomb there, a nuclear tactical weapon, whatever. But the intensity of these evacuations from the right bank of River Dnieper in Kherson was quite alarming, and it's not quite clear yet, what it's about.
Well, Yuriy, thank you. I know it's a long day for you. It's later in the evening there, and getting later, and probably a long day for you, which starts, I'm sure, very early. So thank you for taking time to share with us and talk with us. Is there anything you want to add that I haven't asked you about that you think is important today?
Well, one thing that I would like to say now, as a message of myself as a Ukrainian to the American people, we know and we follow the elections in the US, and we understand that without the strategic partnership between Ukraine and the United States of America, this war for the future of global freedom is going to be very difficult for Ukraine to win. And in this context, we all hope sincerely that the bipartisan support of Ukraine, which was quite phenomenal up until now in the US, because we understand that all the elites in the US, the Congress, the Senate, the White House, they are very well aware of the extent of the existential threat that we are facing and the world is facing right now. So we hope that the democracy will, as always, prevail in the US, that the elections will be just and fair. And we at the same time hope that regardless of the outcome of the elections, we hope that the bipartisan support of our country, of our fight for our common values will continue. And of course, we will be very grateful as always for that.
Yuri, thank you for that wish and hope. And we here in the U.S. are all praying for that as well. And, sometimes we take things for granted. We can no longer do that when it comes to elections in this country or any other country, and
Yeah,
certainly all that is at stake in Ukraine and in other places when it comes to democracy. We certainly can't rest on what took place in the past. We have to work for the future. So thank you again for taking time to
yeah.
chat with us, Yuri.
JJ, what's the latest on the election? Can you give me an update? Because I've not been following for the last couple of hours. I mean, do you have like preliminary results or exit polls or something?
Well, at this hour, Yuri, it's 2:20 in the afternoon, and it's still very early, and it's not even halfway
Right.
through. Most of the polls on the East Coast will close um, in about 5 hours, and we don't have any exit
All
polls
right.
at this point. It's too early for that. And then, of course, you have the time zones, so it'll be another
Yeah.
hours or so before polls in California close, and out west, and so it'll be a while before we know what's happening. But I can tell you this: all of the all of the congressional and Senate races are very, very tight right now.
All right. Well, fingers crossed.
Yep.
All
Thank you,
right
my
then.
friend. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Speak soon. Speak soon, JJ. Have a great day. All right.